title of this video is Recognition. Everybody likes to be acknowledged. I worked really hard on this project. I worked really long hours. I think that management should surely recognise how much I've contributed to this organisation. Now, studies have shown that a top reason why employees leave is lack of recognition. As many as 70% would leave if they did not feel appreciated. And that number is even higher amongst millennials. That can be as many as up to 3/4 of your workers in 2020. So recognition is very important. However, I heard a CEO once say, if you want to be recognised, get yourself a dog. You're here to be paid. Always keep that in mind, that every day your job is there to achieve something for the organisation. You're there for that many hours. You're paid for that many hours. Anything that you get above for that in terms of recognition from the organisation, well, that's just a bonus. But it's not something you need to have. It's a nice to have. Get yourself a dog if need be. Now, credit sharing is very important. If you're working in a team on something and you solve a significant problem and you take all the credit for that, you're stealing. You're harming yourself. You're not showing respect for the people that you work with, and they're not going to want to work with you. It's better to give out more credit than to take it for yourself, because everybody knows what they contributed to a project. If you have satisfaction in your work and you've contributed and you've been part of something bigger, let that be the satisfaction that you get. Do not take the credit and overstate your contribution. It's unprofessional. Now let's look at some lessons from Google. A company like Google looked at recognition in a very scientific way, and there's a very interesting book called Work Rules by the ex-head of HR from Google. If you've got millions of dollars and an employee does something really good, what actually happens if you give them millions of dollars? How does it affect the organisation? Well, Google found that it's much better to give experiences and not money. It creates tensions and issues if you reward certain people in that way. Just because you've got a certain amount of money doesn't mean that rewarding people in that way isn't going to have consequences that you weren't expecting. They allow both managers and their peers to reward employees. If you see somebody else working particularly hard, they can be nominated for an award. They recognise team achievements. They give certificates. They have public thank you notes, where if somebody helps you out, you can acknowledge that in a public place. And witnessing thanks is good. To see somebody thanked by a manager shows that managers are paying attention, that they actually appreciate your work. Now, you shouldn't be working for appreciation. You're there to do a job to get paid. But it is nice all the same. Now, if you really want to recognise people, have a look at the way volunteer organisations recognise their workers. They've done a lot of studies around recognition in volunteering organisations because the volunteers are so important. These organisations cannot function without their volunteers, and they're not paying people, so what are the other options? So Volunteering Australia has come up with this list of things that you can reward teammates with or subordinates with. Some are expensive, some are very cheap, but there's a whole range of things out there. So if you're suddenly in a position where you need to recognise employees, ask the who else question. Who else has had this problem? How are they doing it? And looking at volunteering in this context is a good place to start because they've studied it in depth. The best company that I've ever worked for was a small startup fabless semiconductor manufacturer in Bristol in the UK. They were based on Silicon Valley organisation, and they had several things which made them highly appealing. One, they had frozen meals in the fridge so that if you ever had to work after hours, you could eat. Second, they had a pool table. They had drinks, they had nibblies all day. Just having those sorts of simple things created a real sense that employees were being looked after. I digress. There are a number of ways that you can influence culture. There's a famous saying that culture eats strategy for breakfast. Have a look at that list, and if you need to actually change culture, look at some of those things.